Alright, it's time to do a tier list today, and I want to go through all the adult heroes and give you a bit of my thoughts of what I think, how they're going to be performing going forward. Of course, we have Area coming soon, so this tier list is likely to change a bit once the Area set does release. However, I think it's best to put this one out there already, especially with all the Road to Nationals and all the callings coming up over in the US. And yeah, let's just get into this. This program does show all the young heroes as well. Since we're going to be mostly focusing on Constructed today, I'm going to be just looking at the adult heroes, and I'll just leave these young heroes down here in the bottom where they belong at the time being. But yeah, like there's a lot of very good heroes. The meta is kind of diverse right now, and I'm kind of happy about that. Of course, there is one elephant in the room that is kind of dominating the entire meta game. That's Mr. Chain right here. Like, Chain is one of those weird decks that starts off rather slow, but then the longer the game progresses, the more soul shackles he has, the more damage he can actually deal. So Chain is definitely one of the S tier decks right now, because every turn this hero can create a soul shackle. At the beginning of your turn you can banish cards from the top of your deck, and with so many cards in this deck that can be played from the banish zone, this hero can practically still get in like 3 or 4 attacks even if they just keep 1 blue in hand, simply because they have so many ways of gaining go again. They have stuff like Shadow Puppetry and stuff like that, and I think Chain is definitely going to be one of the most played heroes in the game going forward. Likely not even gonna get power cubed with the Area release. Of course, I don't even know what's it gonna be in Area, but Chain is just incredibly strong. He is kind of dependent on getting good banishes from the top of the deck, and I have been coaching a couple of people over on my Patreon that have been practicing with Chain, and I've been practicing with Chain myself as well, and sometimes things don't really work out for this hero. So I kind of feel like for every Chain that's gonna be in the top of these events, there's also gonna be a Chain at the very bottom, just because they had bad luck. They couldn't find any good cards on the top. But regardless, just because of the sheer amount of pressure this hero can push out and the sheer amount of damage he can push out. Like the other day I was playing against a friend. It was a blitz game though, and he was able to deal like 23 damage on the first turn with 0 shackles or anything. So yeah, it's a very good hero, and this definitely deserves a S tier slot. One of the heroes that does counter him though is Azalea, and unfortunately, Azalea right now is a B tier hero in my opinion. Like, Azalea is not really oppressive enough, even with all her debuff abilities, to really make a difference in the current metagame, especially when there's so many control heroes out there like Guardian and Ninja that kind of can keep on blocking out all her big attacks until she has no arrows left in the deck. So Azalea is one of those weird heroes that can't really go off properly in the current metagame, even with what is called the Memorial Grounds recycling stuff back onto the top of the deck. However, this hero is surprisingly good against Chain, simply because it has access to stuff like Sleep Dart and Red in the Ledger. Red in the Ledger specifically can completely mess Chain over, because it makes so if the Red in the Ledger deals damage to the Chain, they only have 1 action in their coming turn, which means they cannot create rune chants with a legendary, they cannot create a soul shackle, they can only attack, they can only play 1 thing from the banish zone, and usually with things like Bounding Demigon and what's the other thing called, Unhallowed Rites, that require you to play a non-attack action before you can play it from the banish zone, then Red in the Ledger is pretty much going to ensure that the Chain player is not going to be able to play anything that turn. Also, since Chain doesn't really run that many defense reactions, it's very unlikely for a Chain to be able to fully block a dominated Red in the Ledger. So Azalea is in a very weird spot. Like, if she gets a lot of Chain matchups, she can likely even go to the top tier if she wants to, simply because she can keep Chain in check completely. But the way it's standing now, it's kind of harsh, and it's unlikely to only meet Chain matchups, and she kind of loses out to everything else. Maybe she should, like, she would have been in the C tier if it wasn't for her ability to oppress Chain as much as she does. But yeah, there we go. So Bolton is a deck that I personally have been optimizing a lot. It's one of my favorite constructed decks. I managed to get first place at a few constructed army events myself with this deck, and personally I think Bolton has it in him to be in the S tier slot in terms of the amount of damage it can push out. However, the deck has one giant flaw, and that is that if you if you get too low on life, you can't really keep enough cards in your hand to actually charge and to be able to do all your abilities, and because of that flaw, I think it belongs in the A tier. However, we've seen a couple of Road to Nationals where Boltyn has topped already, so I think this is definitely a deck to watch out for. This deck is extremely strong against Chain and also against Katsu, which are kind of like two of the decks that are in the top right now. It struggles against Dorantia, but with Chain keeping Dorantia players in check, like Boltyn is definitely something you want to watch out for. Bravo is definitely an S tier hero right now. Bravo has a lot of very good matchups. It has a 50-50 matchup against Katsu. It has a almost auto win against stuff like Prism, which is right now hanging around the B tier, I would say. So Bravo is one of those heroes that kind of got better with the Monarch release. Like originally Bravo wasn't really doing much to the meta game, but right now I feel this hero got really good, like getting something off like a crippling crush on your opponent, forcing them to discard some stuff, especially when there are so few defense reactions in the format right now. It's really good, and with the more control-y Bravos out there, they can just keep on gaining life and keep on staying ahead of stuff. So I think Bravo is definitely an S tier hero. Maybe we will be somewhere in between the S tier and A tier. He's not like the very top deck, I would say, but he's kind of good. Like, I'm not sure. Like, maybe just because he's not one of the best ones, we should put him into the A tier anyways. But Bravo is a very solid deck. Like, I got beat up by Bravo players many times playing my Katsu, and I think it's definitely something to watch out for. Dash is in a similar slot, like the control Dash build that puts all the, the induction chambers with plasma purifiers onto the field and then starts attacking with the weapon for like 3 or 4 damage several times in a turn. It's extremely powerful, especially since they are running so many defense reactions. I believe that Matt Rogers is the one that has made a top 1 slot in the Road to Nationals rather recently, so you could probably contact him or maybe look at one of his deck lists online if you want interested in playing something like this. I think Mechanologist is definitely one of those decks that I want to be covering on the Patreon soon as an optimized list. Right now I'm working on optimizing the Prism list that I have been practicing with some patrons during the coaching sessions as well. Prism is weird. Like, Prism can either completely go in your favor or it can completely, is completely not able to do anything. So I think Prism has too many decks that completely counter it, including the Bravo and including even things like Boltyn, because they do run a decent amount of 7 attacks with the Celestial Cataclysms and bolting blades and stuff like that. So I think Prism is B tier right now. It's a good deck, don't get me wrong. Like, once you go off, especially with the control Prism deck that uses all the auras to attack in with, I feel, I don't know what to say. Like, the deck is good, but it's not meta breaking good, if that makes sense. Like, sometimes when you're playing as a Prism player, it just feels like a total non-game, and other times you completely smash them without them able to do a single thing. So I think it's a B tier hero. I'm personally not really great at navigating as well. I did play it quite a bit last week. My win rate wasn't too great with it against a range of all sorts of heroes, so I think this one is B tier right now. Dorantia, it used to be S tier, but right now because of Chain it has gone down a bit to the A tier slot, and it's probably gonna stay there for a while longer. Like, Dorantia has a very good matchup against pretty much every single hero except Chain, also against stuff like Katsu, so if she manages to dodge the Chain matchups, then she can kind of go far rather quickly. Doesn't mean that the matchup against Chain is unbeatable, but I would say against Chain she has like a 50-50 matchup. It also depends a bit like whether or not the Chain player can kind of get good pulls off the top. And you can hear from my explanation, like, I feel this deck is so oppressive simply because of things like Riftbind that it's single-handedly pushing a lot of the S-tier heroes that in the pre-Monarch meta were S-tier down to the A-tier slot, simply because it can just generate so much value. So next Ira is a young hero, so we're not going to get into that one. Kano, definitely a B tier hero, maybe even C tier and constructed. Like I have lost some games against Kano, like a friend of mine, he is quite a good constructed Kano player and he managed to beat me a few times. Like Kano can kind of win out of nowhere and constructed, and it's kind of consistent with a 60 card build, but I think it's just too inconsistent to really make a dent in the metagame, so I'll put that one into the D tier slot. Levia, I feel it's completely unplayable right now. Like, the fact that you need to load up your graveyard in order to banish stuff to do your big attacks is one thing, but then having so many attacks that cannot block for anything, it makes Levia in a very weird slot where if she is at like 40 life, she can deal a lot of damage, like fill up a graveyard and just go all in. But once she's under that 20 life range, then the opponent can kind of keep pushing lethal to her, and that makes it very dangerous, because if she cannot use her hero ability to banish a 6 attack during her turn, then she will suddenly start taking a ton of blood depth, and this hero has a very hard time to play stuff out of the banish zone in general, and she will take a lot of blood depth if pressured properly, and I think because of that she is in the D tier slot. Maybe there is room for a Levia hero that takes advantage of more of the generic shadow cards, like what's it called, Ghostly Vision and stuff like that, but I haven't really seen anyone try and build something like that, and even if they did, I think Chain is just much better in general, simply because he can just keep one blue in hand and then banish a bunch of stuff and play it out of the banish zone straight away. So I think Levia is definitely a D tier hero. Like sometimes she can be very explosive, so she's maybe C tier, D tier, but I think the deck is just not good enough, and it's the same in Blitz. I've been trying very hard to optimize a Levia deck, but it just doesn't work. It just does not work. And the counterpart Rhino's doing a lot better. Like Rhino has a lot of good matchups, especially if he gets matched up against something like a Prism, especially with all the intimidating. Like he can just intimidate the opponent's entire hand and then just go in for a massive amount of damage. So realistically, a Rhino player only needs like 2 or 3 good turns in order to win the game, which puts him at the B tier slot. But the hero is also, yet again, not good enough to really make a dent. OTK Viserai, not really working in the current metagame, I would say. I think Viserai is likely a C tier hero right now. In Blitz, this hero is doing quite well. It has a favorable matchup against stuff like Ira, it has a favorable matchup against stuff like Dorinthia as well, as I would say. But in Constructed, it's not good enough. It's still lacking stuff even after the second Runeblade release in Monarch. Katsu is a definite S tier right now, because he has a very good matchup against Chain, and he has a very good matchup against other Katsu players, especially the aggro ones. Right now I'm talking about the defense version of Katsu. I think the defensive, like I think they call it Ninja Turtle, has a very good matchup against all the aggro Katsus that are suddenly coming into the format. And I would say, like, as for the aggro Katsu, it's an A tier deck. It does very well against Chain, but not so well against everything else. So the defensive Katsu is S tier, the aggro one is A tier. And then finally, let's see, what else do we have here? So these are all the young heroes. I'm looking at the list right now and thinking, like, what are we missing here? So Chain S tier, Katsu S tier. I guess Bravo is like at a similar power level as Katsu. Like, I would almost say like Chain is like S tier plus, and these are just S tier, I guess. And I suppose that the Mechanologist could also join the slot right there. Maybe not, maybe not. I think as a finalist, this is probably the one list that, how to say, like, this is probably the list that I would end up with. Is there anything I would change here? Maybe Prism should be at the A tier slot, and B slot. This is correct, this is correct, this is definitely correct. All of these cannot be played as adult heroes, so they stay there. Yeah, I think my final remarks is that this is probably the correct tier list as of right now, with Chain at the very top, followed very closely by the defensive Katsu build, as well as the aggro Katsu build in the A tier slot that can easily beat the Chain matchup, but Katsu has a very favorable matchup against pretty much everything else on here, and he has a very decent matchup even against the aggro Chain build, because he can just side out most of his defense reactions and just focus on full aggro potential. Like, the deck will become a bit thin, but with all the big combo attacks like Surging Strikes into a lot of wind, like, he can really pressure Chain properly to make them make some bad decisions. Like, usually you don't really want to activate your Arcane Barrier with a Ninja Hero, but I did notice like bringing at least one Null Rune is favorable because it makes the Chain players play a little bit different, even though you probably don't have any plans to stop any of the arcane damage anyways. So bring some Null Rune probably in the glove slot and you should have a very good matchup against this hero in general. And I think Bravo is just going to keep on smashing all the other heroes in the format. Yeah, I think that's the tier list for me right now. If you want me to optimize any of these decks, I am likely just going to focus on these top 7 heroes for now, and I'm going to completely ignore these in terms of constructed, because I feel these are the heroes you want to play if you want to be competitive, and these are the heroes you want to play if you're really inspired by one of these particular heroes. But I don't think you can go very far with these bottom tier heroes right there. So as for what hero you should play right now, it's a bit of a tough call. Like, I actually think like if people went with Bravo, they would have a very good matchup against both the Katsu and the Chain players, so maybe Bravo is one of the meta killers right now. But if more Bravo players start joining the meta game, then this is kind of going to autocorrect itself back to the A tier slot. So I guess for now you could play Bravo, maybe pick up Katsu or pick up a Chain deck. Like, Chain is... It's very, how to say, very dicey, because sometimes, like I said, you don't get any good cards off the top, but other times you just have like the absolute nuts pulls and you just keep on going in with damage after damage after damage. So yeah, this is my tier list. I will personally be playing Katsu going forward. I am tempted to build a Bolton deck to bring to maybe one Road to National, see how it will perform. Like, yeah, we did see Bolton snatching a first place slot in quite a lot of Road to Nationals, mostly because a lot of people don't really have experience playing against this hero, which is kind of funny to me, because in my local meta, after they figured out all the Bolton tricks, it was very hard for me to win with that hero in Blitz and Constructed, because people know how to counter it, they know which plays to block, which plays to not block, and to just keep pressuring him. But yeah, a lot of people don't really know how to play against that, so maybe you could even go with Bolton and snatch a first place like all those other Bolton players out there, simply because you can navigate this deck with very great effect if the opponent doesn't really know what to do against it. Anyways, not really the kind of meme video that I usually make lately, especially with the budget deck tags, but I think this video was definitely important. If you're interested in more budget deck tag lists, or you're looking for online armories to play, I update my deck tags on my Patreon regularly. I also have a very nice armory event schedule that I actually updated today, and I got some good news. Like, I was contacted by Legend Story Studios that I will be doing a preview card on the 7th of September, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to make them a very nice video, as nice as my editing skills allow. I'm not a pro editor or anything like that, but I'm going to really do my best to bring out a very cool video for them, and for all of you to see the new cards that's going to be in the upcoming set. I'm really curious what they're gonna send me, to be honest, and I'm also very curious what that not the retail appreciation kit, the content creator appreciation kit is going to be. I'm still looking into organizing that charity event, and I will post an update about that also very soon. Anyways, thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon. I'm getting closer and closer to 1000 subs, and soon I can finally monetize the channel, which means that I will have more time working on content, which is always nice, since I will be able to gain a little bit of income through YouTube that way. Anyways, thanks again, and see you all soon.